Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Anvil here, and I'm back with Sarah for part two of the sticky note take, where we'll be going over the best defensive types. So first of all, what's going on, Sarah?
Living and learning. That's all I'll say. I'm just glad to be here talking about the goodest types and the baddest types.
Oh yes, and
So,
we appreciate your guys' opinions because I know John was in our comments yesterday talking about Rock being his favorite type, and we understand for sure. He had some pretty good points, and we're looking forward to what you guys think about defensive types now.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think I gotta respond to John. So, John, buddy, baby, stealth rocks though. All I gotta say, stealth rocks though. Rock deserves first place offensively, but don't worry. Like I said in the comment the other day, we're gonna crap all over Rock today. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. So, I guess without further ado, we'll just get right into it. So,
yeah.
we have, let's start with me again, I guess. So, my top defensive picks by tier. So, no surprise, Steel is S tier for me. I mean, I think Steel is S tier for everybody that's doing this seriously. Like, it's got, like, it resists, like, over half all the types, you know? Like, Fairy, it's immune to poison, it resists grass, flying, normal, bug, psychic, rock, ice, like, it's just so many. And then if you have a second typing, compared like paired with steel, like steel is one of those types. You add it to something, it just makes it better. You
Yep,
know,
yep, that is true.
like look at Ferrothorn. Some people may think grass is mediocre. I don't think grass is mediocre. But some people may think grass is mediocre. For instance, you get steel, suddenly you have like one of the best defensive Pokemon ever in Ferrothorn. But anyway, let's just stick to steel right now. So steel, besides resisting most of the types, it also resists the other best defensive type and one of the best types in general, fairy. So really big deal that way. And then you have some Pokemon that are steel and fairy, which it's pretty hard to be bad when you're steel and fairy type.
Yeah, yeah, that's faded keys for you guys.
Yeah, there you go. That's why he's the our Lord and Savior. But I'm sorry, I keep talking about other things that aren't steel, but it's just so good. I feel like there's not really much for me to say. It resists a lot of things. The it's immune to sand, so it works well on sand teams, which is the most consistent weather, regardless of what generation you're talking about. Pretty much
Yep.
um, immune to poison, which is a really big thing because poison is a great way for stall teams or just really maybe even like balance. It could be ways of slowly breaking down or chipping down difficult defensive mons typically, or slow down like mons that might set up or whatever. But steel, immune to that. That's just like some weird shenanigans going on there. But yeah, it's really hard to wear down. Resist rocks. That's another big thing. Resist rocks. Um, Great typing overall. I mean, even with like the I'd say mediocre offensive profile, like the defense is so good. And like I said, even if it's a secondary stab, if you set up or you just have like a strong attack, like a Metagross Meteor Mash, for instance, right? Like it's just so good defensively and good enough offensively that I think it's also overall the best typing in the game. The defense is just that good, and it's also one of the few types you can just kind of stack on your team, and it probably won't hurt your team really because there's they're so flexible, they're so easy to splash on. And there's so many good steel types. Okay, I'll stop gushing about steel, but as much as I love steel, fairy almost as good, just below it. So fairy, stops dragons, which prior to the introduction of fairy were probably the best type because of their overall great stats, their high base power moves, and they were only resisted by like steel prior. And to deal with dragon is really good. There are still scary steel dragon types around out there, but yeah, fairy is also was its weaknesses are just steel, which pretty bad, but and poison. Poison is pretty uncommon, so you only got to worry about it too much. I'd say. I mean, there's some things, but mainly it's a steel one that you're worried about. And steel could be pretty, I would say easy to patch up, but there's answers for steel. Actually, no, I shouldn't say it's hard. It's pretty easy to patch up. Like we said earlier, steel isn't a great offensive type, but yeah, fairy is almost as good. Doesn't have quite as many resists, but it does have some pretty good resists. And the immunity, like we said, to dragon. And also, it's Clefable's typing. Clefable's, in my opinion, best one on the tier. So there you go. Yeah, you can get into a more Anvil. My brain's a little fried. Okay, let's get to the A tier. So water. I gotta go with water. Bulky water has been a thing basically since Gen 1, arguably, with things like Lapras and Cloyster. Oh, how far we've come. Nowadays, you have your Slowbros, your Rotom Washes. That's mainly it. I mean, there's also Jellicents and stuff, and I guess Keldeo is somewhat bulky, and sometimes you'll see a rare Slowking. Or Empoleon, of course. Oh my god, Empoleon. Love Empoleon.
yes.
Also part steel. But, Milotic. Probably like one of the most famous. Bulky Waters, Swampert, So even though they're not as relevant, I guess, Bulky Waters, besides like Rotom and Bro and ORAS, it's still a really great typing. Like, it's only weak against Grass and Electric. And both those are super easy to patch up. Have a Steel type and a Ground type, which most teams have anyway. So, like, you have like a Rotom, Ferrothorn, Lando. Like, that's like a great, defensive core right there. So easy to patch up. All of them have access to Scald. There's a lot of moves that are neutral against them, but still, all of them have really great base stats or recovery. It's okay. It's just really solid all around. Like, you can't really complain about water too much. Okay, then we have ground. So ground has a key immunity to electric, which honestly is probably what keeps electric from being a better type, in my opinion, because like I said in last video, a lot of electric types don't have great coverage outside of things like Rotom, Zapdos, and Manectric and stuff like that. And hey, those are the Pokemon that are in OU. So there you go. Yeah, but ground's really great. A lot of them tend to have really high base defense. There aren't really that many exploitable weaknesses. I mean, there's ice, of course, water, grass. That's really it. And you pair it with like a steel type, and that deals with most of those right there. So it's one that has like a very important immunity. They tend to have like good stats. They are very easy to splash on teams, and they're very important. Many teams are pretty naked without a ground type, I'd say. So yeah, and there's a lot of like great examples of defensive ground types. Lando, of course, Gliscor, Hippowdon, Garchomp, even. Probably another big one I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but those are like OU staples, especially. Well, maybe not Hippo as much, but the other three for sure are. Yeah, just really solid type all around. One of the best types in the game. I love ground. And then maybe this is where I deviate with some people, but I really like poison. Now poison, there isn't like the big wall, the great wall of Toxapex like there is in SM in ORAS, but but just on its own merits, still really good. So just like a steel, it's immune to being poisoned itself. Its weaknesses are ground and psychic, which really, I mean, ground's pretty easy to patch up. It's like a flying type or a grass type or something. And excuse me. Okay, but and psychic. Yeah, psychic is also really easy. A dark type. So its weaknesses are easy to patch up. It's not afraid of toxics or soaks up toxic spikes, which also aren't that relevant in ORAS, but I think in general, psychic tends to help a Pokemon's defensive profile than hurt it. And being able to never miss your toxics is really nice. Being able to, if you're like a dual poison type, that has to be like pretty useful. So I'm thinking of things like a Mega Venusaur, right? A Moongus. Like if they didn't have their poison type, they would be a lot worse. So even though there aren't that many examples of it in ORAS, I still think it's a really good type defensively. Okay, now we're getting to B tier. So B, we start off with Dragon. So Dragon's got a pretty big weakness to Fairy, which really does suck for it. But it does resist Fire, Water, Grass, Electric. So all the typical starter types, which, pretty solid. And that's just like pure Dragon. If you had like another typing, right, like Ground or Water or Flying, looks even better. Oh god, I'm yelling so much. I swear, guys, I'm really excited. Didn't sleep much last night. And another thing with Dragon, if we look at the base stat totals, Dragon's got like the best overall stats of any type. So you pair the solid defensive typing with the base stats, and a Dragon looks really, really good defensively. And it's not unheard of for a Dragon to be defensive. Like we got Tank Chomp. Lower tiers, you may see like a Tank Druddigon set or a defensive Rocks Druddigon. And then you got things like Dragalge, which it's like bulky offensive, I guess. There's things like Dragonite, especially ones that run Roost, like multi-scale and it's great natural bulk, can be really annoying. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's defensive per se. It's very hard sometimes for offense to break through it, especially with multi-scale and getting some DDs up and having the recovery with multi-scale. It's really solid combination there. So yeah, I do think Dragon's still a good defensive type. Okay, Fire. So Fire is really interesting. So it's weak to rocks. This is the first rock weak type I'm discussing now, but I think Fire has like some really nice resists, namely the S tiers here. So Steel and Fairy. So resisting those is great. Now it sucks that it's weak to rocks, of course, but the defensive typing like really like pulls its weight. Oh, also resists U-turn, so bugs, bug moves. That's great. Ice, which tend to be the bane of many types actually. Ice type. So being able to resist that is incredible. It's just got like a lot of like really nice resists that even if you take rocks damage, it's still really good still. I mean, you could look at something like Talonflame, like defensive Talonflame or bulky Talonflame. That's like I think the main set, and yeah. So something that's like double rock weak still runs defensive, and part of that is the fire typing. Like what else needs to be said? Ho-Oh runs Regenerator and Ubers. That's one of the best mons, especially in Gen 7 when it gets Defog. So it's takes quadruple rock damage, and it's still like one of the best mons. Because those resist, man. Those resist. I mean, and also they have good abilities, but still, don't sleep on Fire. And we got Grass. So I think Grass is maybe another one people may be surprised I'm a little high on. So Grass, I really love that it resists Ground. Like, if you run a Grass type, you may not be forced to run a Flying type to, deal with ground attacks. I mean, you probably should still, but being able to resist Ground, Water, another nice resist. Those are some really solid resists right there. And a lot of Grass types have recovery or like status. So I'll consider the status kind of like both offensive and defensive. So if it's like Sleep Powder or Spore or Stun Spore, and then combine that with recovery or regenerator, some of them have regenerator, synthesis, leech seed. It's it's got like there's a lot of little things that grass has to help it to sustain itself, and some key resists that I think it's worthy of being in the B tier. But yeah, I don't want to keep waffling on that. And we got dark. So dark, much like dragon, has an unfortunate fairy weakness, which sucks. But it's immune to psychic, and it resists other dark, resists ghost, and it resists. Actually, is that it? I think that's it actually. So it's mainly weak to fighting, bug, and fairy. I believe those are the weaknesses. So the U-turn weakness sucks, but the other ones are relatively easy to patch up, like run a steel type or run a ghost type. I don't know. It's very easy to patch up dark's weaknesses. And no, I think dark is just really like all around solid. There's a lot of attacks, or excuse me, there's a lot of Pokemon that are dark type that have recovery or like just great stat totals, or like just enough bulk that you can overlook their weaknesses somewhat. Yeah, usually dark, is, like I said, is one of those types, like steel, that when a Pokemon is part dark, it tends to help it really well to be good. So it's a good typing overall still. Okay, now I got flying. So flying, I feel like this may be a hot take. So flying, weak to stealth rocks, but many of them have roost, or most of them have roost, and many of them have defog. So they have the tools to deal with the rocks. They have I think the most defensive utility in the form of defog. I mean, compared to like other types, most flying types get defog, I think. So they got that going for themselves. Oh, so sorry. Yeah. And the ground immunity is so important. The earthquake is so spammable, and being able to scare ground types from clicking earthquake is super valuable. Or really any Pokemon from clicking ground attacks. Ground attacks are scary. So having that, in addition to their own recovery move and roost, and many of them have defog, and some resists they resist U-turn, grass, ground. We said, I think that's it. Oh, and fighting. That's an interesting one. So some interesting resists, great immunity, most have recovery, defog. So I thought that was enough to put it in B tier. C, fighting. Yeah, I don't know. So fighting is resistant to rocks, stealth rocks. So it's got that going for it. But besides that, I'm not really sure what else it's got going for it. It's weak to fairy, psychic, flying, which are all really bad types to be weak to, especially all together, because they're all very spammable. So it doesn't really pay oftentimes to run defensive fighting types. They do have some nice mons with like a decent bulk to make somewhat use of their typing, but I don't think there's enough going here to really make it worth it. Yeah, I don't know. It's not crazy about fighting as a defensive type. Solid offensively, but defensively, eh. Okay, Ghost. So I may be underrating Ghost here, but I really do not love that Pursuit weakness and the Dark weakness in general. Like Pursuit and Knockoff are all very common moves, and you see basically every team has Knockoff, or most. I won't say, not basically every, but like majority of teams have Knockoff on at least one mon. So being weak to that, and many of them have like pretty low physical defense stats in general, besides something like Cofagrigus. I'm struggling to think of another one. Make a Sableye when I was in the tier. Also, I had the Dark type going for it too, which helped. Struggling to think of anything else. Pre Gen 5 Rotom forms were Ghost type. They were pretty solid defensively. Um, Spiritomb, very relevant. ORAS Oyumon. I'm being sarcastic. Yeah. Yeah. I just don't love the dark weakness. It's really bad. Being immune to two types, normal and fighting, is something no other type can say. But normal type kind of sucks, and a lot of things resist fighting too. So, yeah, just not that crazy about Ghost Eater defensively. Great offensively. I mean, like especially with fighting, they're actually like really good combo. I mean, look at Marshadow Gen 7, but we don't have Marshadow Gen 6, so whatever. Okay, I mean, crapping on normal. It's all about normal. Normal's just average. You know, it's weak to fighting, immune to ghost. And that's it. You know, I mean, it doesn't have any glaring weaknesses, but just like its offense, it doesn't have any glaring, or not glaring. It doesn't have any advantages really to speak of. You know, there's no super effective types or resist it gets. So it's purely it's super vanilla. So nothing against the normal type. It's just not amazing. Usually it's like a mon that outperforms its stats because of its ability or something. If it's a normal type, it happens to be good. So like Chansey with like Eviolite and Natural Cure and that ridiculous stats. Or Lopunny with its speed and solid power mixed with Scrappy that allow it to hit ghost types with its stabs. So it's neat things like that. But overall, normal just doesn't really have anything really to hang its hat on. So it's pretty low tier for me. Bug. So Bug's weak to some common things. Fire, flying, rocks. Oh yeah, the rock weakness is pretty bad. I think that's it actually. The fire, rock, flying. Yeah. So all those are some pretty bad weaknesses to have, but it does resist ground, so that is nice. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't think bug type's that great defensively. Yep. There are some scary bug types for sure, but oftentimes those mons have a secondary type or like ridiculous stats or move pool or something that push them over the top more so than their bug typing. So yeah, it's all I gotta say about that. Electric, weak to ground, resists steel, flying.
Yep.
Yeah, steel, flying. I think that's it.
Yep.
So the ground weakness is pretty damning in my opinion. That's why something like Rotom, is really good. But most electric types aren't that lucky. Zapdos is. But yeah, I think it's super niche when it is really good, and it's usually only really good if it's paired with like levitate or flying. But the typical ground weakness is just too much for me. Okay, we got psychic. So there are some bulky psychics, like Slowbro, for instance. It's probably one of the most famous ones. And Slowbro is really good. And part is the psychic typing. It's not just the water. The psychic typing helps it take fighting attacks, things of that nature. But yeah, though. It's kind of like try to say. It's kind of like Ghost. That dark weakness is and pursuit weakness, and they typically often have low physical defense. Besides Slowbro, so psychic types are very easy to wear down or trap or kill quickly. Like I said, pursuit and knockoff are just so present and scary, so it's hard to really deal with that for most psychic types. So yeah, I mean it resists fighting, which is nice, but it's really all it resists. And the U-turn weakness is also really bad too. I forgot, so that's also why it's lower than Ghost for me. So it's not only is it weak to pursuit and knock, the U-turn weakness is Pretty unfortunate. Okay, now D tier, the lowest of the low. So we got a rock. See, I told you, super low. Rock has no great resist besides flying, I guess. Is that it? Fire?
Normal and bug.
Oh, normal and bug. Oh, wow, okay. There's a few more than I thought. But wait, really? Bugs are resisted by rocks? Are you sure?
Actually, yeah, no, never mind. I
Okay.
remember the U-turn is super effective against T-Tar, so yeah,
Okay.
never mind.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So flying, fire, and we said normal. Yeah. So the the fire and flying are nice. Normal's whatever. But being weak to steel, ground, fighting, grass, water. Those are all pretty bad. Zones are very common. And rock types are also pretty slow generally, so they're getting outsped, and they often don't have recovery. And if they did, they'd be outsped and like taunted or just killed with like a revenge killer pretty easily. So that's why it's D tier. Most Pokemon do not love being part rock. Besides like T-Tar. Okay, and finally we have Ice type. So Ice type is like the anti-steel. Like steel, for as good as steel is, it's about how bad ice is defensively. Only resists itself. Weak to steel, weak to fire, weak to fighting, weak to rock. I say fire, weak to fire. Um, it's just so many things hit them super effectively, and a lot of them are pretty slow, like rock, and they don't really have much. They don't really have much utility either, And Weavile's pretty good, and that's fine. But if you're relying oh, I guess Avalugg is like and closer are like some examples of like super defensive ice types, but they got like super crazy stats for that. Most ice types aren't that lucky, and even with those crazy stats, those mons are still more niche and often are run offensively, especially in the case of Cloyster. So ice, as good as it is offensively, much like rock, it's about as bad as it is defensively. And that's it. That's my list. Um, yeah, Anvil, you may
Yep.
go.
All right. So, uh, much of my list is similar to Sarah. There's some, notable changes though. I think I can definitely understand a lot of things from Sarah's perspective too. So, let me get right into it. So, first things up, steel. Basically the same reasoning as Sarah. You have the most resistances of any type, and there's so many. Like Sarah said, when you add steel to something, it just becomes goat. Like Magnezone good, Scissor good, Scarm good, Ferrothorn good, Heatran good. You guys can name it. Steelers can do it. Um, and then you'd be surprised. Maybe some of you are surprised. Maybe some of you agree with me. I think water is the deserving of S tier. Um, and as I said in the previous video, I think it's also the best type in general. Although it doesn't offer as many resistances as steels, I think water types have been blessed with like not only good bulk but like good moves, good utility, good abilities. So what I'm mostly talking about is I think the best defensive move in the game. With some of you may be surprised of it being used defensively, but I think Scald is one of the best moves to use defensively because you can 1v1 so many of your would be like counters by just cold burning them. So for example would be like Starmie. If you're trying to get rapid spin off versus like Ferrothorn, if you scald burn a Ferrothorn and burn it, it can't kill you with power rip, so you can just like stall it out, and that's pretty nice. And then a lot of times water types are have like poison coverage in toxic and ice coverage in ice beam, so they can basically like beat most of the mons that would be super effective against it. And the nice thing about water types compared to steels is most of them have actually pretty solid recovery. Even stuff like Suicune has like can viably use rest. Same thing with like Mega Slowbro. And the scariest thing about them is they also can run a defensive set and set up at the same time. So you can run like something like Calm Mind, Slack Off, Calm Mind, Rest easily on stuff like Slowbro and Suicune. And you can just beat most of your counters because after a couple calm minds, like people can't like straight up like two-way KO you. Like Magnezone can't volt switch versus you anymore. It has to click T-Bolt. Rotom can't break your sub usually after one CM on Suicune. So I think that's something to note too. And then also like there's no steel with regenerator. Many water types have regenerator. And if you include Pex too, that's a whole other thing. But I think water types, while they might not have as many resistances, they definitely have the bulk. They have the best move in the game, Scald. And besides like Stealth Rock, and stuff, they have the best defensive move to use, and they also have good utility options, good recovery that just makes the type work. Um, so that's my S tier. Next up, I have Fairy and A. So similar to what I said in the offensive types, I think Fairy is definitely a good type, should not be slept on. It's just I feel like the distribution is very low. There's very few good fairies, and sometimes you can like attribute a goodness to a fairy to like its actual stats rather than the type. I think Clef is a main example of being like a good fairy because of its fairy typing. But other than that, I think like um Diancie and Gardevoir and stuff, they're mostly seen as like offensively. You don't want to switch them into, dragon types or fighting types and stuff. Um, but still, I think it's a solid type nonetheless for being able to resist dragon bug, fighting dark, that sort of stuff. It is really solid to be able to resist dark. Um, so that's why I think fairy is there. And then you guys may be surprised to see me put dragon up high, but I think dragon types should not be slept on. I think most of these successful dragon types in the tier are bulky dragons. You don't see stuff like Haxorus in A tier here. Most of them are bulky dragons, and they're there for a good reason, because they resist many of the most common types in the tier. Sarah said them before: fire, water, grass, electric. Many of them are seen on. You'll definitely run into those types in any game, and that dragon type is like so useful to be able to resist that. And I think that's one of the things that makes certain DD sweepers in the tier more menacing because of those extra resists. Gives you more stuff to set up on. I think Altaria is like a perfect example where, sure, it'd be nice as a pure fairy, but being able to have that dragon typing still allows you to set up on water types, allows you to set up on electrics, on fires, on grasses. So it gives you so many useful resistances against common stuff and makes you even more dangerous as is. And like Sarah said before, you got nice base stat totals as well. So that's why I think it's an A tier. Why I think it's not deserving of S tier is because those types exist. The steel, the water, and the fairy. So waters have ice coverage for dragons. Steels just resist. Fairies destroy dragons. So that's why it's tier. Electric I have a little bit higher up because I think I actually don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking of Zapdos, which I think is like alright. But other than that, yeah, it doesn't really offer much now that I'm looking at it. Mostly a steel resist and electric resist. Oh, actually, I guess since electric is such a common type on other teams, maybe being an electric type can be useful to resist other electric types. But at the same time, when I think of Zapdos and Rotom, they take neutral damage from electric. So maybe I might shift this down a little bit,
Well, I
but
will
yeah.
say one thing for Thunderwave. And sorry to interject, but I'm sorry, Thunderwave. I already said it. They're mean to Thunderwave, which is really
Oh
nice.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
At least starting in ORAS. T Wave is like one of the best moves. So I could see an
Yeah,
argument being made. And there are some like really like Rotom, Zapdos, um, maybe to a lesser extent Magnezone. So some really like threatening electric types.
true,
So
true.
yeah, there you go. Okay, I'm done.
The next one is fire, mostly because of the similar reasons that Sarah mentioned. Fire gives you a lot of useful resistances, makes you resist steel, fairy, bug, ice, and grass. So a lot of you know resistances for a type that is weak to stealth rock. So that's one thing going for it. The only thing it's not higher is what I just mentioned. It's weak to stealth rock, and I think also because of the dominance of water types, where it can't really shine at as much as water types can. But still, a type you should not sleep on nonetheless. Um, I think Heatran is like a perfect example of being a really solid defensive fire type. So is Talonflame, and it's for those very reasons. Being able to, quad resist grass is no joke, and resist those other types is very nice as well. Next up is ground. Honestly, I had the same reasons as Sarah. Being able to be immune to electric is very nice, and then I think that's about it in terms of what ground resists, right? Maybe it also resists rock, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but yeah, being like most of the bulky grounds are like good. Like the immunity goes a little ways for them. Usually they have something else going for them too. So many of them are very bulky, like Sarah mentioned, and they can take advantage of that bulk and set up stealth rock that way. So usually, like the good stealth rockers, ironically, in the tier are ground types, not rock types, and that is for that reason, because they don't have as many weaknesses. So that's one thing going for them. All right, so moving on to C tier, normal. Normal has interesting qualities. I'd say it's not that solid like defensively. Like sure, you're not weak to much, but I think of it more as like normal moves being utility, like for defense. So maybe stuff like glare and soft boiled and slack off, those technically might be good, but as looking at the type itself, like it doesn't really offer much to a team where when you have a normal type on there, being able to like being immune to ghosts is all right, but I probably prefer to have like a dark type on the team to do that job instead. Then moving on to the next is flying. Flying, maybe I might have it higher up, but at the same time, there's like pretty common weaknesses that it may have, and it doesn't quite, it doesn't quite do as much as you want it to defensively. The main defensive flying types I can think of are Zapdos and Tornadus. But other than that, or Zapdos, Tornadus, and Lando, which honestly are pretty solid. But I think they have many more things going for them. I think their base stat totals, their abilities, all factor into why they're so good. I don't think it's just the flying type. Flying sure is good to resist stuff like bug and grass and fighting and be immune to ground. That I'll give it to them. So maybe I might move it up to B tier, but other than that, I think being weak to rocks and being forced to like roost and stuff might not be as good defensively as you think. But I think it's definitely deserving of B tier now that I look at it because like Sarah mentioned it, there's like a lot of stuff you can do with defog and removing hazards. All right, so next up is fighting, and Buzzwole doesn't exist in this gen, so maybe I might not give this too much credit, but fighting types I'd say mainly resist stuff like dark defensively. So you might not see a defensive fighting type, but being able to like resist sucker punch from like an offensive perspective is pretty nice. So say you have like a Breloom, for example, Bisharp wants to go for sucker punch, you resist sucker punch, and then you can just take Bisharp out that way. Cobalion, another example, being able to resist sucker punch is very solid. Then you get that justified boost too, which is really nice. So I think it's definitely an underrated type, but there's too few abusers of defensive fighting types to be actually like a B tier above. So that's why it's so low. Dark type, similar to fighting type, one of the few types that can resist dark and ghost, which honestly would be very solid, except for the fact that there's like literally no defensive dark types that I can think of besides like T-Tar, which has plenty of other weaknesses that you have to worry about, and then Mandibuzz and maybe like Scrafty or something. But yeah, I think the weaknesses, you know, they do more damage than what the dark type is good at. So you're weak to like so many different things like fairy fighting, bug, that sort of stuff. And being, like Sarah said, being weak to U-turn is very bad. Um, that's like one thing holding it back as well. And then moving on to the next one, Ghost. Ghost, I think, is also kind of underrated. I think some people maybe will put it at D, but I think it should be noted that Ghost is pretty nice for spin blocking. So those Ferrothorn Jellicent cores that people may have run in the past were pretty solid. And then you also are immune to like high jump kick, at least from Medicham, which is really nice. You also have options like nice defensive options in like Will-O-Wisp and Pain Split. So Pain Split basically allows you to like chip down your opponent without actually investing in attack. So you could be a defensive mon, Pain Split off, gain HP, and you can damage your opponent that way, which is really cool. But similar to what Sarah said, knockoff pursuit make prevent me from wanting to put it higher. Um, Next up is psychic, and yep, similar reasons. Uh, you resist high jump kick, fighting type moves. You resist other psychics, but yeah, you're weak to knockoff, pursuit, and you're also weak to U-turn. The one thing I will give psychic though is it has a plethora of tools to work with. You got stuff like Calm Mind, you got stuff like Psycho Shift, you got stuff like the screens, you got stuff like Focus Blast, Dazzling Gleam, that stuff. You have the stuff you need. You just honestly you need like finesse to use the psychic type defensively, but I think it could work in the right hands. But you need to like be able to pilot it well, which is why I don't think it's worthy of being a little bit higher up. Next up, Bug. Not many things going for Bug. I think what's make the what makes it D tier is that it's not only weak to rocks, but you kind of need another type with it for it to be actually viable. So the only viable bugs I know are not known for their bug types defensively. Like Scissor is a viable bug, but it's mostly known for its steel typing. Um, I can't think of anything else to be honest. Heracross Mega, that is mostly known as a fighting type. Um, yeah, yeah, not much going for bug. Next up, grass. I should put this higher as a grass type gym leader on our server. I think resisting ground is nice, but I think um, there's a lot of weaknesses that are pretty common, and that's why I can't really put it higher. Because first, like you're weak to like fire, flying, bug. Being weak, I think being weak to U-turn is like a big thing. You guys are noticing right now, but yeah, being weak to that isn't very good. And then uh, toxic is also nasty. Ice type moves are also nasty. And then yeah, you're kind of like screwed that way. But one thing you should not sleep on grass types for is their utility. They have so many tools at their disposal to mess you up. Um, they got the powders to mess you up, the stun spore, like toxic spore, um, sleep powder, that sort of stuff. They got leech seed, they got worry seed, they got a bunch of other stuff. They have access to moves that heal them the most, like the Giga Drain and stuff like that, which is very cool. So don't sleep on grass types. But I mean, as John was talking about his favorite types being rock, I have to also acknowledge that my favorite type grass has various shortcomings that prevent it from going any higher. Um, Poison. Sarah's probably mad at me for putting poison so low. Um, I think poison types are solid, but I think the distribution is like extremely rare for me to want to put it high. I think Toxic is definitely a movie you should not sleep on, but I think the way that the current gen is we're like you really want to toxic the water types, but the unfortunate thing is I don't think you can like toxic stuff like the people running steals very frequently. They're running fairies like clef very frequently. So I don't think toxic is as useful as it would be in like previous gens. But I think you should not sleep on poison types either. But I also think like um not many poison types are used in the tier. I think the main ones I can think of defensive poison types at least are Amoonguss and Venusaur and maybe Chad Roserade as well. Um, so I think the main things they do for those mons is give them fighting immunity, and I think that is pretty solid for them to actually become Keldeo switches. So I'll give them that. Um, yeah, so that's my reasoning for poison. I just think there's not many mons that can utilize it fully. Uh, unlike like packs like in Gen 7 and above. Next up, I have ice. Similar reasons. You got so many weaknesses. It ain't worth it unless you're Avalug. Um, and then finally, I have rock. Similar thing. Not many defensive rock types besides like Tyranitar, but Tyranitar has got a bunch of other things going for it. Just weak to so many different things. Steel water, fighting, grass, ground. Yeah. So those are all very common types. You really don't want to switch into them. The rock types, I'll give them that have very high defense. Maybe if you use Regirock in a live, that'll actually become useful. But other than that, I think if you're a rock type, stick to offense, or just put rock type coverage on your mons and use a ground type as your rocker, because that's probably going to fare better. But yeah, that's our list.
Yeah. Oh
Sarah,
wow.
you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, we could do a few things. Let's see. Let me just look at my list again. Doesn't bug resist fighting actually?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
I forgot about that. Yeah, maybe I would put bug over normal, maybe. But I mean they're all in the same tier, so it's like splitting hairs. But
Mhm.
I think you're fair in saying that poison has pretty low distribution. Like I mean Venusaur and Amoonguss are like the main ones, and even those they also have the grass type going for them, which makes the ground neutral, which could be nice depending how you look at it. But yeah, there aren't too many. There's a lot of steel types, like you said, that can come in on like toxics and stuff, and toxic spikes, which can be great sometimes, aren't super meta defining in Gen 6 at least. Um, no, if toxic spikes was in this generation, thank God it's not. I think maybe like it would skew this a little bit differently.
Sure, sure, sure.
But no, I don't know. I guess maybe like it maybe seem a little inconsistent. How like for some types, I'm saying, oh well, this type is fairy, so therefore it gets a buff. But um, I don't think I did that. I mean, Clefable is mainly the fairy we're talking about. We're talking about fairy. You know,
Mhm.
it's like the ideal fairy type. Like, even though there aren't too many other ones, or really any other ones that do what Clefable does. Just having Clefable exist, is enough. And I like everybody already knows that fairies are good, pretty much. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think many people like that are fairy haters. Um,
I also want to say that I think this is based on what we think in ORAS. Like obviously like with more mons coming out like stuff like Toxapex and Buzzwole, these types can just change immediately because I know like in my list a lot of this was based on distribution, so there weren't that many mons that could utilize uh bug defensively and stuff like that. So now in like current gens, there are, so that also skews some of our decisions too.
mm,
I also want to say about one thing I want to say about Fairy is I think that Fairy never got like a chance to shine the way people think it is. Like, for example, Fairy was introduced when Megas were introduced, so you already got stuff hitting like extremely hard to begin with. So some people may not rate fairy like A or S tier maybe, but and then when megas were removed and stuff like that, Pex existed and Soaking Galar existed, so it also never got a chance to sign. But I think when you look at fairy by itself, it is a very solid type to work with. It's just unfortunate that not many mons are fairies defensively besides like Clef.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's definitely true. But I think part of it is also just looking at like things like holistically. Is that the word I'm looking for? Maybe, or like taking like everything into account, or like hypothetical. So like it's very easy for instance for like a steel type to succeed defensively. You know, like it's easy to imagine that because steel types have so many resists, right? It's easy to see like an ice type uh, doing badly defensively because it's ice. It's has no resist besides itself. So in that sense, we already kind of know. Just from that, like which types are great, which types are poor. It's mostly like the middle stuff, like everything else that is up to interpretation. And yeah, oh yeah, like in Gen 7, with the advent of electric surge, grassy surge, psychic surge, those abilities on Tapus gave a buff to some things that both of us I think underrated a little bit in our offensive um, top offensive types, right? So all it takes is like Game Freak to give like a busted ability for things to change, you know.
Here,
But I think I think we did a solid job with our picks, even though we disagree a little bit on some things. But I think overall we're like in a similar place. And I mean, you could tell like I'm biased for poison. I do generally think it's a really good type. Like you pair it with like dark, for instance, and like they both benefit so much from that, and they just have like the ground weakness, which again,
oh yeah,
so easy to patch up. So yeah,
yep.
so sometimes they're very synergistic. I think we mentioned that like steel, fairy. I'd argue steel. I mean, sorry, poison, ground. Like, basically all the types we like are the types that you want to see more mons get typically. Um, yeah, I guess that's about it. So part of the game is being able to take attacks and set up. Actually, I don't know where I'm going with that. Never mind. Forget it. I'm out of words, man. You got anything else?
If you guys have any suggestions on where we could go with this, maybe you guys would be interested in like top best type synergies or something. Please just like let us know in the comments. Maybe we could incorporate it into like our team building series as well. But it's all up to you guys if you guys are interested in that. But yeah, but if not, like we'll stop here.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah,
I was gonna say at the very least, guys, tell us what you think about our picks in the Chimeco box below, and
mhm.
yeah, tell us like, do you agree? Do you disagree? Did maybe we change your minds with some things? Like, did I win you over on the poison type? Did Anvil, make you reconsider how good Fairy actually is defensively, or how poor, flying type might be compared to my opinion? Actually, we're not that far off. It's like one tier different.
Yeah, I might shift flying up.
Oh, okay, never mind then. Ignore. But yeah, let us know what you think. I love we love feedback.
Yes.
Um, I guess that's about it, guys. So just click all the YouTube buttons. Chimeco, Bronzong, Lickitung,
Oh
like,
yes, yes. We
comment,
forgot to mention.
subscribe.
Thank you for 50 subscriber guys.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and we're actually at 51, I think, at the time of this recording. So
Yeah, yeah.
got like 3 subs since our last video, I believe. So maybe we'll do like a. Actually, no, maybe 50 is too low. Maybe try to get us to 100, guys. Then we'll do a video for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. True.
But thank you so
Um,
much, everyone who watch our videos and comment. Like we've definitely seen like an increase in viewership last month or so since we've been really uploading a lot. So I hope the quality hasn't suffered too much. I think we've gotten a little better at this since we began. Um, yeah. Sorry, I'm like kind of waffling now.
It's all good. I also want to thank the viewers from around the world. It just brings a smile to my face knowing we got the international audience going. We got the guys from Malaysia. We got the guys from Turkey. We got the guys from Liberia. We got the guys from Egypt. We appreciate you,
Mm-hmm.
and we hope you'll stick with us on our journey to 100 and beyond as well.
International. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Peace.
Later.